Okay, we'll get started here. So good afternoon. Welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We're so glad that you can join us today. We have really enjoyed the weather for the last couple of days. I'm not really looking forward to the heat coming up, but I know a lot of gardeners have said they've been able to get a lot of plants in the ground in the last 3 or 4 days, where it's been a little drier. So my name is Donna Aufdenberg. I'm your host for today, and I am from down in the above the Boot Hill of Missouri, down by Cape Girardeau. We have a lot of great, timely information for you today. And as always, please send us those questions so that we have talking material. I have, let me get to the state map. There we go. So you might just take a look at the state map and figure out where you are on that map and take a look and see who covers your area. Just familiarize yourself with that person. And if you don't have somebody in your area, just look to the closest one down or up. And that would be the person that you would contact. And really, you can contact any of us anytime that you have questions throughout the week. Or the gardening season for that matter. So at this point, we are going to do the weather report, and I will let Zack take over.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Missouri Weekly Weather Summary. And it was another active week across the state. Everybody in Missouri saw some rainfall, but just how much rainfall you saw at your location really depends on where you are at in the state. So here, if we look at our last 7 days worth of precipitation, and these are radar estimated totals here on the left, we can really see, again, rainfall across the whole state. But anywhere we see these yellow colors, that's in excess of 2 inches of rainfall. And so we can really see where the heaviest of rainfall was really in southwest Missouri down to south central and southeast Missouri. A lot of this rainfall came over the weekend here. But if you see this area of orange and red, these are some very high totals that we saw here. Really anywhere from 3 up to 7 inches of rainfall, especially just north of Springfield here as well. And so on the right, I've zoomed in on that area just north of Springfield where we saw some of the highest rainfall totals. And these are some of our CocoRa's citizen science rain gauge observers here. And just look at some of the totals here. Lots of 4 to 7 inch totals, getting over from Cedar County all the way east and down towards Springfield as well. And so these were really some of our highest totals. Now, if you look to the north and really roughly north of the Missouri River, there's quite a drop off with some of these totals, and especially in northeast Missouri. And so I do want to show here that not everyone's getting this very heavy rainfall and some of the flooding we've seen as well. In fact, parts of northeast Missouri saw just around 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rainfall in some spots. And this is notable because here in June, we usually get quite a bit of rainfall. And for most spots in the state, our weekly average rainfall for this time of year is around an inch. So 1/2 inch, we're still running behind what we would usually see on average. And so with this past week's rain, we can also now look back at it officially our end of May summary. So we got our official statistics for the entire state. And so I want to briefly take a look back here. May really continued temperature-wise the trend we've seen since February, and that's for above average temperatures here. And so we can see with our bar graph here, we had below average temperatures in January, but then we've been very warm. And so May, not as warm as February through April, but still notable. Our average temperature statewide was 67.9 degrees Fahrenheit. This is 3.7 degrees above average and good enough for our 17th warmest May on record, and that's going back to 1895. But what's really notable is if we put these 4 months together, February through May, where we've had these above average temperatures, we're continuing a pretty warm trend here. And through May, our year-to-date temperatures are the third warmest on record. And so we'll have to see if this trend continues here into more of the summer months. For precipitation, because we had an active pattern during May, just like April, we added another wet month to our calendar for Missouri. And so our statewide monthly average precipitation total was 5.81 inches, which is pretty impressive. This is just above an inch above average and not much in the way of setting a record, only our 34th wettest April on record. But it does continue this trend here. And so now we've had 2 months with back to back above average precipitation here. And if we actually look at that year-to-date precipitation total for the state, January through May, we're running about 2.5 inches above average in the summer. And so this is great to see at this point in the year, especially coming off of back-to-back drought years. And so hopefully we can continue to see this abundant rainfall. And so now that we've got about 10 days into June, we can start looking at how our month to date is shaping up for June. Temperatures have been really right at average. So if we look at our 5 sites here, Springfield and Cape Girardeau, slightly below average temperatures. Columbia, St. Louis, Kansas City, slightly above. And so not much here, but I do expect when we look at the forecast moving forward that we're going to change this quite a bit. And I think by next week, the trend will be that we're seeing above average temperatures here in June with some of the heat that's going to be expected. Precipitation at this point in the month, it really just depends where you are. And so on the right, we can see here our percent of normal so far in the month for precipitation. And really, you see the greens and blues were really just our rainfall from over the last weekend. And so you can see those above average amounts here where we got the heavy rainfall. But again, north of the Missouri River, roughly, you see a lot of those yellows and oranges. We do have some locations that have started the month of June out dry, and we're even a little bit below average for precipitation in May as well. And so because of that, if you've looked at the latest U.S. Drought Monitor, this came out last Thursday, June 6th here. We've still got some of our dryness here in southeast Missouri and down into the boot heel, but now introduced this new area of abnormally dry or D0 conditions in northeast Missouri. And this really shows here from a drought monitoring perspective, really the kind of looking at this area in northeast Missouri where over the last 40 days or so, slightly below average for rainfall. And so looking ahead, I've kind of teased the heat here, and I think that's going to be the big story, that for the next 7 days, for the first time this year, really the heat is on. And when I say the heat, I mean a multiple day stretch with temperatures well into the 90s here. And so today, looking at our high temperatures on the left, a lot of locations, especially to the north actually, going to hit 90 degrees today. A little bit cooler to the south, looking more towards the upper 80s, maybe mid 80s even in southeast Missouri. But if we look here on the right, we can also look at our dew point temperature, which gives us an idea of how much moisture is available here in the atmosphere. And dew points in the lower 60s, that's actually pretty comfortable for the summer. Definitely some moisture in the air and some of that humidity, but it's not going to be overbearing. Now, the reason I'm showing that is because as we get into Thursday, again on the left, look at our high temperatures. We really ratchet up things a few degrees here. And so looking at highs now in the mid 90s, especially across northern Missouri. But look at those dew points by Thursday. Now we brought more moisture into the area, dew points in the lower 70s. This is when we start to really get uncomfortable with that humidity here. And when we combine that high humidity with temperatures in the mid to upper 90s, on the right here, we can look at our forecasted apparent temperature or heat index for Thursday and look at that at 105 in the Kansas City metro area. And so really coming close on Thursday to some heat advisory, really heat advisory categories here. And so looking forward, the reason we're going to see some of this humidity pull up is on Thursday, we're going to have a system that's moving through, and ahead of that, that's where we're seeing that moisture come through. And so on the right shows precipitation totals associated with this event, and I do want to show that they're not very heavy and really confined to northern Missouri. And I also want to note that even though this forecast looks like we might see pretty widespread quarter to a half inch of rainfall across northern Missouri, this is going to be convective or thunderstorm precipitation, meaning it could be pretty hit or miss for a lot of locations. But regardless, on the left here, the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted northern Missouri in this marginal to slight risk for severe weather. And this is going to be for Thursday into Thursday night. And so we'll have to keep an eye out. It's not a very high risk, but still could see tornadoes, damaging wind, or hail with some of these storms here. But after Thursday and when we get into Friday, really the story will be that the heat's going to slowly return over the weekend, and we're not really going to expect much in the way of rainfall Saturday through early next week. And so here you can see Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, temperatures really warming back up into the mid 90s by Sunday. On the bottom here, I'm also showing our heat index, and just like today, Friday and Saturday, we're really not going to have too much of that humidity. And so not expecting our heat index to be much higher than the temperature. But by Sunday, again, some of that moisture is going to have worked back into the area, and we could see those heat index values start to spike. So how long will this heat last? Looking ahead, it does look like these warm temperatures are going to persist into next week. And so looking at the Climate Prediction Center outlooks here, our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, all but a certainty for above average temperatures across Missouri and really all of the Midwest US. And then on the right, really also predicting, and with not as much confidence, but kind of a calmer and drier pattern as well. So we really need to continue watching some potential drought concerns here, and not much of a change when we go to the 8 to 14 day outlook as well. Still a high chance of above average temperatures with the signal for a drier pattern here as well. And then finally, I'll end here. This is a product for the risk of hazardous temperatures, and really those temperatures that would be hazardous to human health or livestock, thinking about the temperatures getting in that heat advisory or excessive heat warning range here. And I do want to note here that the Climate Prediction Center has placed most of Missouri here in this dotted area in a moderate risk for excessive heat, and this is going to be June 19th through the 21st. And so only a 40% chance at this point, but just shows that we might expect these warmer temperatures to stick around for quite a while. And so that's all I've got for this week, and I hope everyone can take some time to find some cooler weather and stay cool during our warm stretch here. So thank you all.
Okay, so it's I know the heat was coming at some point. I just didn't expect it this early, but that's okay. We're going to continue gardening as we always do every year. Just have to take time and keep cool and take precautions. So one thing I failed to mention earlier is if you have any questions anytime during this program, you can go to the chat to the ask your questions here and just type in your questions there, and we will get to them. If it's towards the end of the session, you might go ahead and put your email address in there with it, just to make sure that if we don't answer it on this program, that we can answer it shortly thereafter. Okay, so we're going to get started on our topics for today. First up, we have Tamra, who is going to talk about ticks. Okay, there you go, Tamra. Take it over.
Hi, everyone. Let me just bring up my screen. Hopefully you can see that now. Now, this is not necessarily a topic that any of you want to talk about, but it's something that we need to talk about as this is tick season. In fact, ticks can be active anytime that it is 40 degrees or higher, which it's been that way for quite some time. We usually start seeing ticks around April throughout the summer. So if you're outside, that could be, going on a hike or even working in your garden, or, if your dogs are out there and then they come inside the house, ticks can be there. So we need to be on the lookout for them. In Missouri, we actually have several different kinds of ticks. These are the most common kind. We have the American dog tick, the Lone Star tick, black-legged tick, and the brown dog tick. And it's really important to kind of get familiar with these different species, just in case you do happen to find a tick on you. You'll want to preserve it, but hopefully you also recognize it so that you can let your doctor know if there's any issues after that. There's actually 800 species of ticks worldwide. There's soft ticks and hard ticks. And like I said, we have many different species here, but the two most frequently encountered hard ticks are the Lone Star tick and the American dog tick. So hard ticks, they spend most of their life on the ground. They're about 95% of their lives are actually off of their hosts, and they can actually withstand long periods of starvation while off the host as well. So when they have the opportunity to get on a host, they will take it, and they can actually sense the movement, the warmth, the breath when people are walking by. So if you're walking by and there's long grass nearby, they might feel that vibration and they're going to be looking for you. That said, they do not fly, they do not jump, they're not falling from trees. They're usually on grass. And knowing that will help you be able to prevent getting ticks. So some things that you can do, we're going to talk about IPM. We always talk about IPM, Integrated Pest Management. There are things that you can do to avoid ticks when you're out and about. So some examples are walk in the center of trails. You want to do that to avoid the overhanging brush or tall grass that they can be in, because then they're not going to be able to just brush up onto you. They have an interesting behavior, and let's see, back in this slide right here, it's called questing. So where they'll actually hold on to a leaf of grass or a blade of grass, and they will reach out their legs waiting for you to come by. So if you come by and they're able to brush up onto your clothes, then they will do so. Back to some other prevention tips. It's a good idea to wear insect repellent spray or some type of insect repellent. Now, DEET is a good one that helps keep them from being able to smell you. Permethrin is something that you can also spray on clothes that actually will kill ticks. It also has the benefit of killing mosquitoes and chiggers. If you wear light colored clothing, that's going to help you be able to see ticks more easily. And if you're walking along, you might actually consider tucking your pants into your socks. And for an extra measure of protection, you can actually wrap your socks and pants with tape, and that can definitely help. Staying on the trail will also help reduce your risk to get ticks. And then also in your lawn, in your yard, you can also do things to help get ticks. If you have wildlife that visits your yard, you can get ticks in your yard. So things you can do, you can keep that grass mowed. You can also mulch a 3-foot wide border on forested edges, and that also will help reduce the amount of ticks that you can have. So when you are done being outside, make sure that you do a tick check. So check your clothes. You might even want to change your clothes and throw your clothes in the dryer on high for 10 minutes, and that will help kill any ticks that are on your clothes. You're going to want to check your body. This slide right here shows all the places that are common. Really, they're looking for any place that bends or is some sort of a crevice. They can get around your head, your armpits, your groin area, your knees. Those are common places where they could be. They really can be anywhere, but these are places where we often find them. If you do happen to find a tick that's on you, you can just take it off. I recommend killing it. You can kill it by, well, probably the easiest, the most sure way is to put it in a bag, put it in the freezer for a couple days, and that will make sure that it's dead. Squishing them, you don't really want to do that because you can get fluids on you, and ticks can be disease vectors, and so we don't want that on you. So this also goes for when you have a tick that's embedded in you, and that means that their head is attached to your skin. You do not want to just pull it out. Grabbing the body can actually push those fluids from the tick into your body, so you don't want to do that. So what you're going to do is you're going to use a pair of tweezers, or there's actually commercially available tick removers. They do the same thing as tweezers, and you're going to grasp right here at the very base where it's attached to your skin, and you're going to pull directly out, not to the sides, but directly out. Don't twist it, don't jerk it, just pull it directly out. And then again, put that tick in a bag and seal it and put it in your freezer. The reason for that is if you do have a reaction, if you do get sick, you're going to want to be able to identify what kind of tick that is, because different ticks carry different diseases. Not all ticks carry diseases. Not all ticks that can carry diseases have the pathogen to cause a disease. So just because you've had a tick bite does not mean that you're going to have a disease, but you just want to keep that just in case. So for your skin, you're going to want to wash it with soap and water, and you might want to put an antibiotic on it as well. For your yard, just to help modify your yard to create tick-safe zones, this infographic gives some good examples. Again, keep your lawn, especially right around your house, in the areas that you're walking as well throughout your yard. Keep those areas with short grass. If you have areas with a lot of trees, then having a 3-foot wide mulch barrier will help so that they don't crawl over to where you are. And also it gives you a place to walk without grass. So something else to keep in mind is your pets can also get ticks. Cats and dogs are common. They also can get ticks. They can get tick bites, which also are itchy. They also can get tick vector diseases. So you're going to want to prevent or help them to prevent getting ticks. So talk with your vet to learn about different prevention options. There's some pills that they can take. There's applications that can be made, topical applications, but you'll want to talk with your vet to make sure you're putting the right one on your pet. Again, if they get a tick, you're going to use the same removal procedures as humans. Use those tweezers, pull them straight out, and wash the wound. There are some insecticides that are sometimes used for ticks. These are right here. These are also found in a publication that we have, which I'll drop in the chat. Also, I will be putting in the chat these resources. The CDC has fantastic information about ticks, about prevention, general information, and what to do if you get a bite. They also have what's called a tick bite bot, so that if you get a tick and that it's embedded, they can help you understand what your next steps are. So hopefully we'll all be able to be outside and have a lot of fun doing our gardening and whatever else we're doing, and hopefully be tick-free. That's it for today.
Thank you, Tamra. That was great information. Just to take a second, just to make sure, is Dr. Trinkline on? I have not seen him, so I'm assuming he's not. Okay. All right. So we will move on. So our next topic is by Gwen, and she is going to talk a little bit about roadside flowers, the roadside revelations, as she calls it.
Hello, thank you, Donna, and I hope everyone is staying cool today. I'm coming to you up here in Northwest Missouri, which looks like we're going to be pretty warm the next few days. So I wanted to talk about, like I said, I spend a lot of time behind the windshield driving around, and I just always look at the roads and sides to see what's blooming and what's going on. And I noticed that we have some thistles that are blooming right now, and I thought it might be good just to kind of talk a little bit about some of the different ones. So let me go in here. Thank you. Let's see here. There we go. So a little bit of trivia. Thistle is a very generic term. It's applied to 29 different species of plants, flowering plants. Those 29 species are dispersed through 9 genera, which are in 3 different plant families. So you can see that this is a very broad general term that we use to describe a lot of different flowering plants. You may have heard about the Scottish thistle, which is the flower of Scotland. The little bit of trivia with that is that an enemy troop of Vikings were trying to come up on the Scottish castle, and one of the attackers stepped on a thistle and yelled and warned the people in the castle what was going on, and they were able to overcome the attack. So that's why that's what I've heard, that how Scotland got that name, or that flower got that name. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If we think about thistles, I know my dad would just shake his head at me when I was growing up because I would always run along the fence lines. We grew up on a farm, and I would always snap off the thistles and I'd bring back a nice little bouquet for my mom because I thought they were very pretty. I liked the little ball shape and the little spikies, not the spikes on the stems. I was very careful not to get that. But I also thought they smelled really good. And I've also heard that some of the people, our first peoples in the United States, or when we migrated over, actually brought these over to help be an ornamental type plant. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I have read that. My dad would just shake his head at me, but then he thought, well, at least the flowers aren't going to seed and he doesn't have to worry about that. So that was kind of a funny thing. But our non-native thistles are invasive and they are listed as an invasive species. So there is some rules about managing them. They do compete with crops. Like I said, my dad fought them all along for a very long time. The three main ones, and this isn't all of them, but the three main ones that we worry about here in Missouri mainly are the Canada thistle, the musk thistle, and the bull thistle. And I thought it was really interesting. I have Steiermark's Flora of Missouri from 1963, and it listed the Canadian thistle at that time as not being very prevalent around Missouri. But I think now we can see that it's definitely spread and has moved throughout Missouri. These are all thistles that we want to try to control. We want to make sure that we cut them out, remove the seed heads or the flowering heads so that they don't go to seed and so on. They do need some management. However, I think, all thistles are not bad. And we do have some native thistles that we do need to protect because they are incredibly important to both birds and for our pollinators, and they rarely compete with our crops. They work really well in our prairies and pastures without competing for some of the species that we're trying to grow in our cropland. So I've got the picture that you see here is of the field thistle, which I will show you here in just a minute. But we can basically break down the native thistles into two different kinds of blooming times, spring blooming and fall blooming. So Cirsium undulatum, this one in the Steiermark's 1963 version, this one was not widespread. It probably was documented in about 6 to 9 counties, and it was all, in the 4 corners of the state and a few in the center. So it may be more widespread than that now, but at that time it was not considered very much, it was not as widespread. And then we also have swamp thistle. So if you live down in the Boot Hill region or on the southeast side of the Ozarks, this is one that you might be seeing right now blooming in more of the wetland type areas. And then our non-native thistles are also blooming right now. So at this point, you kind of need to think about and try to identify whether or not it's the non-native one that you have, or if it's the native one, because we want to protect the native ones. Now, the fall blooming ones, this is a tall thistle, and that's what you see pictured here. I think I said it was field thistle earlier. I got that confused, sorry. Cirsium altissimum, this is the one that's most widespread over all of the state. So it's really common. It's I have this growing in my pasture, and the birds love it. The little goldfinches are just drawn to it. I see monarchs on it. I see swallowtails on this plant. They are very well liked by our native pollinators. You will also see field thistle, Cirsium discolor, and not quite as widespread as the tall thistle, but still relatively common. The main thing that you see with the native thistles that you do not see with the non-native thistles is if you look at the little rosette over here on the left, do you see the white fuzziness or the white coating of hairs on the bottom of the leaf? The native thistles will have that white coating, whereas the non-native ones will just be green. So that's one quick way that you can look to see whether or not you might have a native thistle or a non-native thistle. Now, if you look at the involucre, that's this part right here that the plant, the inflorescence, and in this case, it's considered a raceme or a head, an indeterminate type. That is kind of pear-shaped, and most of the native ones will have that kind of shape as well, whereas the non-native ones do not, except for the Canadian thistle, and I will show you that here in just a minute. This diagram is a drawing from Tim Smith put this article together, and I think the source will be dropped here in the chat in a minute. That kind of shows you the different leaf types and the different inflorescence that you might see in the thistles. So the three that are non-native, we have the musk thistle right here. And this one has spines and wings all along the stem. So if it looks really, really gnarly, it's probably going to be a musk thistle. And it also, the involucre is very flat shaped rather than that pear shape that I kind of showed you earlier. The spotted knapweed is also considered in this group. This is the same group that bachelor buttons, you may be familiar with that, or cornflower is also in this genus. And you can see again that that is another noxious weed that has to be controlled if you have it in your area, but it has that little pear-shaped involucre. And then here are the native field thistles. And here's the native tall thistle. So you can see the tall thistle does not have the divided leaves like you see, or the lobed leaves like you see in the non-native ones. However, the native field thistle does have some of that lobes characteristic like you see in the non-natives. However, again, they're not quite as gnarly looking as some of the others. So I wanted to show you this because I think it's really important to know what it is that you're trying to control. And this is an infographic from the EPA, and you can see it's it's a collaboration of several different entities. But when we're thinking about protecting pollinators, the first bullet there says, make sure pests are identified correctly and use the correct pesticide for the pest. And I think people sometimes see a thistle and think that they are all bad, and that is not necessarily the case. We need our native thistles as well. And it's always with integrated pest management. You want to follow the label instructions, apply when the pollinators are not active, and then avoid spraying the pesticides on the flowering plants if you can. So that was my revelation for this week while driving along the roads up here in Northwest Missouri. So I hope that you're taking a look and maybe learning a little bit too. So that's all I have, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. Fascinating topic. So next we have Katie, who's going to talk about herbicide carryover in manure.
Let me get my screen shared. All right, are you seeing it?
Yes.
All right. So, I have been getting a lot of pictures like this in the last week or so, and chatting with coworkers this morning, they have also received a lot of pictures like this. So even hearing a description on the phone, typically I have a pretty good idea of what is going on. So if this plant is unrecognizable to you, it is actually potatoes. And you can see the soil in the background looks fairly wet. So in a garden. And they did comment that in this particular case, they had also seen some of this last year in their garden. Another gardener sent these pictures in of tomatoes, and you see that same weird, curly, gnarly growth at the top of the plants. And other interesting things of note in the background, you can see in the first picture a squash plants. and corn in the other one. So you notice that the soil around the plants kind of looks darker here, like maybe they've added something. Uh, and also got these pictures. So these were some samples brought into a county extension office, and they took some pictures and sent to me. So all of these, the issue was herbicide carryover in manures that they had applied to their gardens. And interestingly enough, some of them were different sources of manures. Well, of course, these questions have been coming in from lots of different places, so different manure sources. And they had applied manures to their gardens, thinking that they were going to help the garden. However, these manures were contaminated with a herbicide. So there are some pasture herbicides that control broadleaf weeds in the pastures. So the pastures are getting rid of their weed problem and have grasses either to make hay or to be a pasture. And the animals eat either that hay that has been treated or grazing in the pastures, and that herbicide carries through the animal and through the manure. And then when applied, even if composted the proper amount of time, all of those things, that herbicide is still active. And you notice that tomatoes and potatoes are particularly sensitive to it. So in this particular one, I was kind of curious about the squash in the background, not really showing any signs, but squash doesn't seem to be as sensitive to it. And she also told me that as we got to talking, that they had applied more manures, particularly on the tomatoes. Corn will be just fine because corn is a grass plant, and that herbicide just goes after broadleaf weeds. So corn, perfectly fine, not going to affect it at all. It is just that there are several particular herbicides that do this, that are applied. So we can also get some of these signs with drift events, but it just so happened that all the cases I've had 3 or 4 questions in the last week, all of the cases that I have talked to the growers have all been from manure applications. So in the garden, honestly, I would steer away from using manures. You really have to know your source and history, and know where your hay comes from, know that pasture, know the farmer if it's you or the neighbor or somewhere else. So in particular, be very sure of that source if you are going to use it. The other caveat with using manures in the garden is there can be food safety concerns when we use manure products. So a piece of advice might be just to stay away from manure products in the garden, because there are other soil amendments and organic matter that we can add to the soil in different ways where we don't have to worry about contamination issues. And that's all I've got.
Okay, so now it's my turn. So I get to do what I think is a fun topic. So I am going to talk about a new tool that I bought for myself, and it is a plant auger. And so a plant auger is basically a spiral tool that you would put on the end of a drill, or you can get manual ones. And basically you just, it twists into the ground and digs a hole for you. I was able to plant or drill and plant into holes, about 150 of them within like an hour. And because I was able to get this new tool, the bit I bought ran around $25 and fits in the end of like I said, a power drill. And you can get different lengths. So some of them can be short. The ones in the pictured in the middle are shorter, but the one over to the right is a lot longer. I bought one that is about 2 foot long. but I am only going about 4 to 5 inches deep because I'm planting a lot of annuals. But what I'm using it for is I don't want to have to go out there and till that soil. I want to leave most of that soil intact, except for the hole that I'm digging. And I got tired of using a trowel to dig that hole. So I thought, maybe there's an auger or something that can help me. Well, that's when I found myself at the local store looking. And so I spent about $25 on it, and I have been blown away at how easy that it is and how efficient my time in the garden has actually became by using it. And so just some general information. The benefits is it keeps you from working the whole soil area. And for those that are no dig type gardeners, and I try to be that more and more as I progress in my gardening career, I like the idea of just digging that hole. It's a great tool. Less manual labor. You don't have to worry about doing so much with that trowel, especially in a hard packed soil. Easier to establish the plant spacing and the design. So you're pre-drilling your holes beforehand. And so you can set out your design for whether you're using it in bulbs or you're putting out annual plants. And so then you can go in there and plant relatively easy and efficiently. You just have to worry about backfilling, definitely. I can't emphasize enough that I was able to do it more efficiently and faster. That doesn't mean you need to be rough handling plants to do it in record time, but it just means that it makes it a little bit more efficient. The other thing I like about it is it prevents that muscle strain that you might have using that trowel. Yes, you have the weight of the drill, but the muscle strain that comes with a bulb planter in the fall when you're wanting to plant bulbs, and if you plant hundreds of bulbs, it can really cause tennis elbow issues, or whether you're using that trowel. It makes it much easier. And then the other thought is, my husband was very happy when he seen that I had one now, because he goes, oh, now I can use it to mix soil amendments together. Oh, now I can use it to mix seed treatment onto my seeds for the fields. So there are other things that you can do also, even soil test with it. You can pull a soil sample with a soil auger. So lots of different things that you can do. Well worth, in my opinion, the $25. There are all sorts of them online. I did scour the internet before I did this, just to see what was available. And I was stunned to see they come in all sizes, all widths, lengths. And so it's just based on what you want to do with it. What's nice is the auger bits fit most power drills. You want to match the auger size to whatever you're wanting to do. And, I know there's been some concern that the hole has rigid sides, but there are ways to really lean that auger down and make the hole bigger and make it a better hole. And so I urge you to play around with it. You want to drill to the full depth of the root ball that you're planting, or the full depth of the auger blades. You want to lift that auger out of the hole to remove the dirt. And then you're going to be planting into it, and then you're going to backfill into that hole. So a really cool tip to, a really cool tool to look at and see if you might want to try it and experience it. And so that's all I have there. So let me stop sharing.
One follow-up question came in, Donna.
Okay.
And you kind of did answer some of it, but what about spreading the roots out? Is there space in the hole?
Yes, and that's why I like to take that auger and sort of lean it to the side. So when it's burrowing that hole, you're actually making that hole a little bit bigger and more flexible. But yes, you still want to, I say, tickle the roots, or, readjust those roots and pull them apart a little before you plant. Okay, so any other questions right now? Okay.
No, that's all. Oops.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
I did have one come in about the manure carryover, and yes, I did forget to mention the fact that it takes time for this to go away. that garden plant, like those tomatoes and those potatoes, are not going to recover. It does take time. A lot of it depends on your soil, how much rainfall we're getting, how much was in the application. So there's lots of variables that affect how long it takes. And one thing you can do to see if there's still a herbicide issue in the soil is to plant green beans. Green beans come up fast. They also show signs of the carryover by showing those weird puckering leaves and odd growth. And that's on to the next one, Donna.
Okay. All right. So next we have Tamra, who's going to give us an update on our cicada damage.
Thank you. Bring it up. All right. All right. So the cicadas, they came, we saw them, we heard them, and now they're mostly gone. So I just want to give just kind of a review of the experience we had and what you might experience going forward if you are in an area where cicadas were. So obviously they came, billions of cicadas in many states. Much of Missouri experienced this emergence. Unfortunately, here in Kansas City, I didn't get to see cicadas, though I did hear a lone male near a gas station near the interstate. It may have been brought in by someone else. I did get a lot of questions from people saying, hey, I thought they were coming and we didn't get them. There were a lot of reasons why maybe you didn't get to see them. That maybe if you're in an area that is a field, they have to have trees because they're feeding on tree roots. If you're in an area that was a new development, you may not have had cicadas because they had to have trees there 13 years ago so that they would have had a chance to develop. And of course, there's some, just because they're in a county doesn't mean they're everywhere in a county. And in some counties, like Jackson County, we were on the edge of their range. And so we just really didn't experience them. So we definitely heard cicadas. I don't know if I'll be able to make this work. Nope. I was going to have a sound clip for cicadas in here, but if you were there where cicadas were, you heard them. You probably can still hear them ringing in your head. It's the males that sing. The females respond with a wing flick if they're responsive. I do have a video that if you want to see, and I'll drop it in the chat if you want to hear the sound or the songs of the cicadas. Each species has their own song as well. And we had 4 different species, really just 3 here in Missouri, but each one of them had their own song. And there are different websites that you can go to if you want to hear the different songs. Of course, the cicadas mated. That was the whole point of them being up here above ground. So in brood 19, we had 4 species. Brood 13, there were 3 species. They did have a little area of overlap in Illinois. And I actually was working with some scientists that study periodical cicadas, and they found that the different species will actually breed together depending on if they're in the same group. Like the Cassinis will still breed together, and the Turdicula and the Tridecum. Even though they're different species in the different broods, they would actually interbreed. Now, we don't necessarily know what the offspring will be like, if they would actually be like a 17-year or 13-year. That takes a long time to do that kind of research. We also found that there were zombie cicadas. So there was a fungus that affected the cicadas, not all of them. In some areas, it was like 2%. In other areas, it was as high as 10 or even 15% of the cicadas could be affected. And this is an interesting fungus that will affect periodical cicadas. So it affects both male and female, but when the males are infected, there's 2 different stages. The first stage, they actually become hypersexual. They'll respond the same way a female would to another male. So they'll flick their wings when they hear a male song. And that way they're able to spread the fungus to other males. The second stage of the fungus, they can actually lose their abdomen. And you can see that with this cicada right here, it actually doesn't have an abdomen. Sometimes that fungus will be that basically it'll look like just a piece of chalk that's attached to the to the cicada, and they can still walk, they can still fly, and I've heard someone refer to them as flying salt shakers of death, where they actually can spread those spores to other cicadas. Of course, the females were then laying eggs. Females would insert their ovipositor, and you can see this happening right here, into the stem, and they will lay a series of nests. Now, there can be about 20 eggs per nest, and each female can lay about 400 to 600 eggs in her lifetime. So what are we going to start seeing now? If you aren't seeing this already, you'll probably see it very soon. In trees, you're going to start seeing branches on the tips of trees the leaves are dead and the branch can break. Now, this is caused by the weakening of stems from the egg laying of the females. So here's an example of this is a red bud that a female was laying eggs. It can look like this. The little holes can actually be closer together. You can actually have many different females who are laying eggs on a same branch, and that will weaken this branch. These are where the eggs were laid, and nymphs will start emerging from these about 6 to 10 weeks after those eggs were laid. The nymphs will drop to the ground, they'll burrow underground, they'll locate a suitable tree root for feeding, and then they're going to begin their 13-year development. One more thought, if you do happen to have trees that are damaged, or have these oviposition sites, you don't really need to do anything about them. They will, if they're going to drop off, they'll drop off on their own. If you have a small tree that seems to be pretty heavily damaged, you might want to consider talking to an arborist to get their advice on what to do. Usually you do not have to prune it out. If it already is broken, then go ahead and prune it out properly. Usually these branches will just snap off and they'll be fine. Some trees actually can have, these wound sites can actually be a weak site that can, they could get a disease. And so you do need to be watching out for that. What are we going to do with all the cicadas that were here? Really, you don't have to do anything. There are a lot of animals out there that will help take care of them. For example, here are a bunch of ants that are taking care of this one. Given that we have tons of ants, they do a good job of cleaning everything up. Within a few weeks, all that you're going to have left are things like the wings or the exoskeletons. In case you didn't get enough this time, you don't have to wait another 13 years before periodical cicadas are going to be back. You might for your area if you don't want to have to leave home, but here's the map of all the other periodical cicada broods. It looks like we might actually get them over in the Kansas City area in, excuse me, with brood 4. They'll be back here in 2032. That's actually a 17-year cicada brood. Brood 13 or brood 19, which was here in Missouri, it's a 13-year cicada brood, and so it'll be back in 2037. Also, just a reminder that we will have annual cicadas that are coming. These are different. They're much larger. We see them every single year. They will be showing up in the next month. So that's it. That's a wrap for cicadas brood 19 this year in Missouri.
Okay, thank you, Tamra. Okay, so our last topic is going to be covered by me. And I decided to cover a little bit about a weed in the garden that I'm having to deal with, and I've had a couple of people call in about, and that is purslane. And it just seems like after drought years, it seems like our purslane, the populations explode. And it could be the fact that the rains came back and all the seed is laying there and it all sprouts at once. Who knows the real reason? All I know is we're starting to see a lot of it. So in this slide is pictured purslane. It is a very hard weed to control. It's an annual and a succulent type plant with fleshy stems and leaves, and it spreads like a flat mat. So a lot of gardeners deal with this weed and, pretty consistently, and it can be a difficult one to control. It loves full sun. It tolerates poor soil. So even if you have a really poor site, you will see it. It loves to have bare spots and newly disturbed areas where the seeds can come up very easily. We find that it takes over in areas where there's thin lawns, and it thrives in between bricks and cement, cracked cement. And so the other thing that I have to say is it is very drought tolerant. So in our hot summer days when we're not getting any rain, this guy is still going strong. And so what are the control methods for it? Well, one thing I want to mention is that it is very resistant to herbicides. If you know, it's easier to treat a lawn because we don't eat the lawn than it is in a vegetable garden because we eat the vegetables. And so it's hard to recommend a lot of chemicals that can be sprayed in the vegetable garden because there's just not much labeled for it, especially with purslane. The big things I tell people is one, dig it. And once you dig it, don't let it lay because it will resprout, it will reroot, and don't chop it off. If you chop it off, once again, it's going to resprout. And so what you want to do, if you pull it, you want to pull it and get rid of it. So I usually have a bucket right there with me as I'm pulling or digging it. And I throw it into the bucket and then I send it to an area where nobody cares that it grows. The other thing that I must say is don't let it go to seed. And a lot of times people let it bloom, but within a week or so, they're already going to seed. So the big thing is don't let it even bloom. That way you don't have to see it go to seed. One control measure that I've had a lot of good success with is actually smothering it. So I get large pieces of cardboard and just put down over the top of it so it blocks out the sunlight, and so the growth stops. So you can do that with plastic, you can do that with cardboard, you can do that with a thick weed barrier. If you use the cardboard, you want to definitely weight it down with, you know, cinder blocks or brick bats or something like that. There is some research that says solarization does work, especially when we have hot, bright, sunny days. If we have a lot of overcast days, it's not. So you need to save solarization for when it's going to be really, really hot, dry, and sunny. There are shown to have some pre-emergent herbicides that will work on the purslane, but you just have to make sure to read the label and make sure that that purslane is listed and the vegetable garden is listed as a site. And that way we comply with the label and the law. You know, if you have it real bad and you're trying to remove it, go ahead and remove it, but limit your irrigation. And that's in the areas where you have a lot of it because the irrigation will just and make it resprout and seeds to come up even worse. And so I have even went to drip irrigation so that I am not watering the whole garden. I'm just watering at the sites that I have desired plants. And therefore, other than rain, those areas don't get any moisture. And so that can help limit the purslane. The other item that a lot of people will say is you can eat it. I've never eaten it. But a lot of people say you can toss it into a garden salad and that it tastes good. But I've never done that, but I encourage you. It might be something that you might want to try. Okay, so that's all I had on purslane. I'll stop sharing. And we are going to wrap it up for today. Okay, so just let me get my computer to work. Okay, so just remember that all these sessions have been posted on as live streams on the YouTube IPM page. So you can go to the address that is on this website, or I'm sorry, on this slide, and find all these neat videos and snippets, and then you can also watch previous episodes of this program. So really neat to have those resources available. Just remember also that we are meeting weekly now from noon to 1. And if you would like to ask a question, you have to go back to the registration page and submit that question at the registration site. please, please consider if you've got something going on in your garden, or you have a question that comes up, or one of your friends have questions that come up, please consider shooting us an email and asking that question to be covered on the Garden Hour. Remember that you can save the chat. You open that chat box, go up to the 3 dots, click on the 3 dots, and it will give you an option to save the chat. And it's always nice to save the chat because we give lots and lots of different links and resources that you can go back and look at. Okay, and just remember that anytime you have a question throughout the week or the month or even the gardening season, we are here for you, and you can reach out to any number of people that are on this map, and we will be happy to help you. So at this point, I hope everybody has a good day and enjoy the week with gardening. So see you next week.
Just a reminder, we will not be here next week. It is the Juneteenth holiday.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, it is the Juneteenth holiday. So everybody remember, we will send out a reminder email. So we will be back here in 2 weeks. And so we'll see you in future dates.